This is gonna be a real stinker.
Oh man, I can
It's a stinker.
I can feel the coffee slowly fueling our brains.
Give me strength, bean juice. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Backstage Gaming, dramatic takes on your favorite games. I'm Chris.
And I'm Dylan.
And welcome to our first ever morning record.
It's a very special AM episode of the podcast.
We are both of us nursing cups of coffee and figuring out exactly how to use a brain in the morning, because this is when we could record this week. But here we are. We did
it for you.
We did it. I did this for you. We've got a topic that I've actually had on the docket wanting to talk about since we started the show, but I just didn't, we always had like more exciting things at the moment. We were like, yo, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about failure as a narrative tool and how games do and don't use it. Because failure is necessary for good stories. There is a pejorative term for characters in stories who never fail, and you might know it as either Mary Sue or Gary Stu. Like, failure is necessary for a story to feel good, and yet games, being things that people want to play to win, don't typically build failure in the same way that, say, a film or a TV series or a novel might for their main character. So we're going to kind of dive into that topic.
Yeah.
Before that, I have discovered recently that I am apparently... I don't consider myself to like have a type as far as people that I am attracted to, but I have discovered recently...
Oh my god, are we talking about this?
I think it's funny.
Okay.
We don't have to if you don't.
No, it's fine. I'm fine with it. I thought we weren't going to.
I have discovered recently that I apparently am a type for the people that shop at the store that I work at, specifically almost exclusively black ladies who are old enough to be my mom. I've just been getting a lot of up-downs and a lot of eyeballs, and yesterday a lady that as I was handing her bag of groceries, I heard her under her breath just go, "So strong." And I don't know what to do with this, like...
Well...
Like, Dylan, help me.
How?
I don't know, but I trust you. I brought this to your desk because I thought you could help.
Let's see, I have a funny anecdote about how my Jade eyes saved me.
Well, now you must share.
I was driving to a convention, I was meeting my friends there, and, it being an hour-long drive, I stopped for gas. And as I paid for the gas, the lady working behind the counter was like, "You have very pretty eyes." And I was like, "Aw, thanks," because I love compliments. I'm a sucker for them. I get back in my car, and I'm like, "She said I have nice eyes." And then I'm like, I'm thinking about my eyes now. And then I'm thinking about the fact that I'm wearing contact lenses. And then I'm thinking about the fact that I forgot to bring my contact lens solution.
Oh, no!
So if I didn't go back home right then and there, I would have a very miserable weekend.
And that gas station attendant, Sarah Michelle... Wait, I was going to say Sarah McLachlan, and then it came out Sarah Michelle Gellar, so I don't know. I don't know what we're doing anymore. I mean, like, I like compliments too, but I don't know what to do with it when they're things like...
No, I understand
that. So do you do a lot of upper body exercises? Which is another thing that a woman said to me in that tone of voice.
Oh, no.
And
You should hand them some Gatorade so they can punch that thirst.
We've got a whole cooler full of drinks right around the corner from the cash registers if you're feeling thirsty. Oh, I don't know. I'm working out because I want to look pretty, but I didn't know it would have this consequence.
Not all these middle-aged black women.
No, this isn't what I wanted at all. I've been sent to the Shadow Realm. Enough about this. Let's dive in.
I feel like it's important to note that it's not specifically the fact that they're black women.
No, not at all. It's that they're old enough to be my mother, and some of them old enough to be my youngish grandmother. Anyway, we're going to talk about... Speaking of which, we're going to talk about failure this week.
Excuse me.
My own failure as a person is what I want to clarify.
Oh, wait, before we get to that...
Okay.
Important follow-up to last week's episode.
Oh, yes, please.
Kingdom Hearts 3 came out. I started playing it. That game does drop you right into the heat of the action. Unlike Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2, there really isn't any rising action before you start exploring. It's just kind of like you press start, there's like a couple cutscenes, you get the FMV with Utada Hikaru music playing, and then boom, you are in the game. And so, at first I was like, oh shit, maybe a full 7 games of build-up was necessary.
Man, romance me a little bit first, Nomura.
But like, you know, as you kind of keep playing, like I figured it would, because the main character is privy to a surprisingly sparse amount of information that the player would be privy to, you do get filled in on quite a bit.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
that's also...
but it's kind of like as you play the game, you kind of start to pick up more things. Like, you'll never understand everything, but like, you'll get all the basic points you need to get the general gist of the story.
Okay,
whether or not you like
good.
that story is up to you, because Kingdom Hearts is weird, but like,
yeah.
If it's your thing, you'll coast.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with beginning a story in medias res. There's nothing wrong with, like, launching into the action as long as there's a little bit of context given as you go so that you can make sense of it.
It has a very God of War 3 cold open, if
really?
that makes sense. Like, not
He's
quite.
Sora cutting down a tree to add to the funeral pyre of his dead wife with his Keyblade.
I don't... God of War 3.
Oh, sorry.
Where, like, it kind of
For me,
starts...
all God of War is now God of War 2018 because that game is a masterpiece.
Yes. It doesn't quite start in the middle of an action set piece, but, like, literally, you're like, go here, and then you go there, and it's the middle of a huge action set piece.
That was kind of, you know, in case anyone didn't listen to last week's episode, we were talking about the Kingdom Hearts games and their sort of, shall we say, bulbous accumulation of lore that has occurred over the past decade. Holy cow, we're old.
We are old.
Yeah, we that's what we talked about last episode. So that's Dylan coming in with the clutch insider info now that the game that we were talking about has actually launched.
Yeah. Like, again, if the story drops you in, but like, you know, hopefully if you play it, you will have an interest. If you're playing it and you've never played any other Kingdom Hearts game before, hopefully you will have an interest to go back and see the rest of the story.
This year we're going to be talking about failure in narratives and in games and how games...
This whole year?
You know what? I thought you loved me.
Well, you know what? If we're going to be talking about failure, we should talk about that line flub you just...
Yeah, that's... You know what? We're living in it. This week, this episode of the podcast that we produce together professionally, we're going to be talking about failure, like me,
oh, no.
and diving into like what failure is useful for narratively and how games use it, and more typically, how games kind of fail to use it to its full potential, which I hope will kind of make sense as we get into this. I want you to just take a walk into the dreamscape with me, listeners, and just see if you can think of any piece of media, narrative media, I should say. This won't show up in, like, non-concept albums, I guess. But any piece of, like, any story that you like, whether it's film or TV or theater or game, comic book, whatever it might be, and see if you can think of an example of a story that works well in which the main character never fucks up. Because I really can't.
I'm thinking.
Arguably... And I'm not the biggest comic book fan, so I'm worrying about putting this out there. Arguably Superman.
Superman's fucked up before.
But that's the thing. All of, like, the Superman stories that I know of and that I like revolve around him making mistakes.
Oh, okay. I
so,
see
like,
where you're going.
Like, I'm sure there are comics of Superman where, like, Superman is completely infallible. But, like, those aren't the ones that I remember, you know?
Yeah. Any
example you can pull to, like, Dark Knight. The Joker comes about because of Batman, and the Joker is able to get so much of, like, the shit he gets done because Batman fucks up, or Harvey Dent fucks up, and Harvey Dent ends up messed up because of a fuck up that Batman makes. Like, it's all... Good stories and good problems are based in, or at least are compounded by, mistakes that people make while trying to solve them, if that makes any kind of sense. In order for a story to have a satisfying conclusion, it can't just be like, oh, wow, that was a walk in the park. He really solved that problem with no difficulties whatsoever. That would be boring. You need to have the moments of, like, mistakes being made, or the hero not getting the villain, or the villain beating the hero, or, like, whatever it is to give that emotional weight to, like, oh, he finally did it. Oh, they finally won. Oh, she finally cracked the case. Whatever it might be. This runs into problems because games are based on player input, player action, and video games kind of came to being largely in arcades, right?
Yeah.
And if you lose in an arcade, you lose money. Arcade games were not typically, I'm not going to lay out blanket statements, but typically were less story-focused. But even then, you know, you're playing to win. Arcade games were all about playing to win, playing to get a high score, playing to last as long as you possibly could, whatever it might be.
I have to get the girl at the end.
Exactly.
Maybe she'll give me a smooch.
I have to get my name to the highest point on the leaderboard, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And because that's where video games came to be, that is also where a lot of, like, the mentality of how people put games together for a long time crystallized. This has become far less true as time has gone on, but, like, at their core, game design, if you trace it back far enough, all stems kind of from the video arcade mentality. Mm-hmm. And in that, there's no such thing as a, like, satisfying failure.
Right.
Because, like, you're out a quarter, or you're out 50 cents, or you're out a token at Chuck E. Cheese, or whatever it is.
The emergent narrative of Frogger.
Yeah. My children are waiting just over this next road. But that is sort of where the idea of, like, how games engage players came from. And then as games started to care more about storytelling and care more about, you know, putting together a narrative that people can follow and that people can enjoy and that can be satisfying to experience, they weren't really able to shake that mentality of, like, but we don't want the player to fail. That's not to say that characters can't fail. I can think of a lot of games where, like, gonna just reach into the ether and pluck one that I can be vague about. Like Halo. You're running, you're gunning, you're doing your thing, you're fighting the aliens, Master Chief's a cool guy. And you get to the end of the level, and then Cortana pops in and is like, oh no, while we were doing this, we fell for their bait, we fell for their distraction, now they're sacking the city on the other side of the ring, or whatever.
Same thing with, I just thought of Ocarina of Time just now.
Jump in.
Where, like, you're doing everything you're supposed to do, and then you hit a point in the story where you do what you're supposed to do, and that's bad. And that changes the next half of the story.
Yeah, and, like, not to say that any of this is necessarily bad, because you're building a narrative, you're building these moments of failure in, but you as the player have never failed. You as the player have been doing everything you need to do. You as the player have been, you know, completing all of the objectives that have been set before you and doing what you need to do, and, like, maybe you got a game over in there somewhere, but, like, game overs are not...
Even if you fail, that is a fail state, it does not change how you need to play.
Yeah, if you fail, it's a game over, which is the game going, oh, you fucked up. Don't worry, we'll rewind for you a little bit. I don't know why the game is, like, kind of a sassy Brooklynite. But maybe that's what it sounds like when Link plays his Ocarina. Left, down, up. Hey, what you doing?
Why?
I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
Oh, it's a good morning, happy morning podcast, everyone.
Well, welcome to the Backstage Gaming Morning Hour. But, like, that is what the player's failure states are, and they have no bearing on the narrative failure state. When you get to those points where it's like, oh no, while you were doing this thing that you were told to do and that you had to do to progress the plot, bad things happened. And, like, you're still getting that moment of, like, the tension of, like, oh no, we were wrong, bad things are progressing, the story has gotten darker. But games are interactive, and there's so much potential for failure to feel like the player's fault, but also surmountable, if that makes sense. To dive in, to get, you know, granular and actually provide an example and stop kind of talking around it. One of my favorite games that has a really cool way of engaging with failure are, well, two games now, the modern reincarnations of the XCOM games. XCOM was an old tactical game in, like, the 90s about defending the Earth from extraterrestrial invasion. And then it got rebooted as a 3D top-down tactical, like, move your pieces around on the board, shoot the aliens, defend the Earth game called XCOM Enemy Unknown. And then a few years later, they put out a sequel, XCOM 2. And what I love about these games, I've put so many hours into the first XCOM and a fair number into the second as well.
I can attest to this.
They are built around missions, and they're all built around, like, kind of having to make hard choices. You, as the player, are taking on the role as the commander of this military organization trying to fight off this alien invasion. And so as you're directing research and expanding your base, you'll suddenly get a distress call, and there will be 2 or 3 simultaneous alien attacks. And you have to pick the one that will cause the least harm, because each attack, like, increases the panic level in the area that is being attacked unless you go to it and stop it. But you can only go to one of the 2 or 3. So right there, you're immediately building in, like, hard choices and tension and the potential for, like, real bad things to happen if you're not really on top of your stuff. And then when you're on the ground, you'll have objectives like maybe you have to kill all the aliens, maybe you have to hack into an alien terminal, maybe you have to rescue an important person who's attempting to be abducted. But the great thing is, if you fail the mission, that's not game over. If you send in, like, a team of 4 soldiers and 3 of them die and you have to evac the last one without succeeding, that mission is still complete. You just fucked it up, and you have to deal with the consequences moving forward. And I wish more games were able to engage with this, because, like,
So I actually have a question.
Yeah, hit me.
In one of your many playthroughs
Yes.
of XCOM, were you able to get yourself out of the hole when your best teammates bit it?
Yes.
Okay.
It was fucking hard.
Okay.
Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I refuse to play games like XCOM not on... in XCOM, they refer to it as Ironman Mode, which is where the game automatically saves after every decision you make, so you can't go back and save scum. And it can be backbreaking to, like, lose your crack squad.
Okay,
like,
so that's where... in the Fire Emblem community, a lot of people called them Iron Man runs, and I was always wondering where that came from, and now I realize, it's from XCOM.
Yeah, I mean, it might be from something before that. I just know that is what it is referred to in the game menu of XCOM. I don't know if it's the first game to use that. It can be game over to lose your best squad. Like, if you send in, like, your 6 most elite units and you just, like, make a bad decision and end up losing all of them, that can be the end of the line, but it isn't automatically, and you have the option and you have the opportunity to continue that game and see if you can dig yourself out of that hole. And, like, I've played a lot of XCOM. I don't really remember, beyond, like, very surface level details, what the actual, like, in-game narrative plot of XCOM is. Beyond, like, aliens invade and you have to stop them, you know?
I was about to say, like, that is the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah. What I remember are the moments of, like, my squad got flanked, 2 of them got killed outright, 1 of them got taken to, like, 1 HP, and my sniper just, like, laid down covering fire while that guy slowly dragged himself to the evac zone so I didn't lose everything.
Wow.
Yeah, like, it builds these moments of, like, because you know the failure is real, the tension is so much higher. Because you know the failure has consequences, you care a lot more. And it leads to these, like, really impressive moments of, Dylan, you used this term earlier, emergent narrative, which is a really good term for this kind of, like, the story that comes out of games from you playing them, not just from what the writers put in there.
Yeah,
like,
the fact that, like, the highest point of tension in a game is not a set piece that the designers made for you, but something crazy that happens that ramps up the stakes because of the way the mechanics all come together.
Yeah, there was another run I played where, like, there was 1 soldier who made it from the first game, like, the first intro level all the way to the end game. And then he ended up eating it in that last level, and, like, that hurt more. Like, that, you know, randomly named, randomly generated pawn in this game dying at that moment genuinely, like, caused me more pain than... It was almost on par of, like, Dobby dying in Harry Potter. Like, it was a similar amount of, like, oh, man, Chief.
Oh, man, I feel that.
And, like, I think that is fascinating, and I wish that part of that is just the formula that the XCOM game has of like you go out, you do missions, you come back to base, you deal with the consequences of the missions you didn't take just as much as you handle the rewards for the missions you did take. And it's all about managing different failure options across the board. But I feel like there's potential for this kind of like giving your mistakes and giving your choices as a player more narrative heft in a negative way in more games, which brings me neatly to a segue to a game that I was hoping Dylan would be able to talk about a little bit.
Yes.
Jump in!
So last week we were talking about Resident Evil 2. Not last week, 2 weeks ago we were talking about Resident Evil 2 and loss aversion. And so, sorry, I was just kind of having a flashback because Resident Evil 2, the remake, is a very scary game that puts you in a lot of very precarious situations. So the really cool thing about Resident Evil 2 is that, like, I recently beat my first run of it, and it's like a very scary game, guys. Zombies do not fall. Like, they take a lot of resources. It takes a lot of resources to down even one of them.
Ooh.
And, like, about a third of the way into the game, you have your first, like, real boss fight. And it just ate up all of my resources. So I went from, like, having, like, a comfortable amount of ammo for every weapon I had to, like, oh, I have 7 bullets in my handgun and 2 shotgun shells. And that forced me to completely rethink the way I'd been playing. The way I'd been playing, I was able to comfortably, like, take out any zombies I think would get in my way in repeated encounters. Because, for people who don't know or don't remember, in Resident Evil, there's a finite number of zombies. Once a zombie is dead, they are gone for good. But there's always the risk of losing all your ammo.
Yep, and to balance that out, there's a finite amount of bullets
Yes.
that you can find.
Incredibly finite. And so,
Every time I remember that, I think that's the fucking coolest thing.
so good. The hardcore mode also brings back limited number of saves. So,
Oh no!
I haven't done that yet. But I've heard it's, like, really hard. Yeah, so, like, I'm going through these different levels that I won't spoil for people who've never played Resident Evil 2 before. And I have to take out these, like, terrible mutant creatures with, like, you know, my 5 handgun bullets. And that completely changed the way I played. So much so to the point where when I started a new run, just I became so efficient at conserving my ammo that, like, you know, it's still difficult because, like, ammo still needs to be conserved and, like, enemies are still bullet sponges. But at the same time, I had way more ammo than I ever did in my first run through. But it's just kind of like you're really forced to kind of take a pause and, like, really try to understand how each enemy works, like, what, not their mentality is, but, like, what their behavior is, because they're zombies, so it's really hard for me to explain right now, but just
I get what you're
the
saying,
really cool
though.
thing, and you really have to think about every single enemy you encounter. Can I afford to waste these 3 shots I have left? What if there's another boss coming out? Will they give me the ammo I need?
God, imagine the failure state of being on, like, your last clip.
Dude, that was Resident Evil 2 for me.
That's such a... And, like, again, it's different because it's not like, oh, you've, like, lost, but, like, you can make mistakes that have ongoing consequences that add to the tension and add to the sort of narrative stakes of your specific playthrough there. And that's a really cool... Like, all that is them coming up with a system they wanted to implement and putting it in there. And that's really rad. Question for you.
Yes.
If you run straight out of bullets, can you win the game?
Oh, let me think.
Like, is there a way to succeed?
But, okay, so yes, but you might have to tank some hits.
Oh, it's so good.
Like,
this is the shit I want more of in games. This is the shit that, like, I love games that provide you with, like, variable tension, and the fact that your actions have consequences is a blurb that has been showing up on the back of game boxes for a decade.
Yeah.
And what that typically means is something like the Mass Effect games, which were famous for, like, giving you choices that then, like, those choices would come back later on in the story.
Yeah.
And that's cool, and I like the Mass Effect games a lot, but like that is a very written in
sensationalist.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a very scripted form
Yeah.
of this kind of actions have consequences, which again, not a bad thing. You can't really build in infinite variability in things like the story of a game, especially one with as much text and voice acting as the Mass Effect series.
Not until we develop perfect AI.
And then we have more problems than not having engaging enough failure narratives in our games.
I feel like there's a lot of moral quandaries there.
But, like, that is what is typically referred to when a game will brag about, like, look at all of the consequences of your actions. When what I'm looking for is, like, no, give me those consequences in your mechanical systems. Give me just enough wiggle room in the mechanics that you've built that I can dig myself into a hole that I have to dig myself out of. Yeah. Because that's the gameplay experience that I'm going to remember more fondly.
So I think that actually segues pretty nicely into Metal Gear Solid 3.
Jump on it!
Yeah, so in Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid 3 is a stealth game where you play as an American espionage agent in the 60s. And so you are infiltrating a fictional jungle in a real-life region in Russia. It's wild. Basically, a large emphasis in the Metal Gear games is on sneaking past your enemies rather than killing them. That's emphasized in the story, but I don't think it's ever really properly been emphasized in the gameplay.
Yeah, it's there in like the way that the game is themed and the way the game is presented.
Yeah.
Metal Gear, the tagline for the series is tactical espionage action.
Yes.
And like the way that the games always frame themselves are very like, all right, we're dropping you in. You're outnumbered. Figure out your way in. You've got to figure out what you're going to use while you're there. Weapon and equipment, OSP.
Yep.
But then I think you're right. I don't think it's ever like, do it sneaky.
Yeah, like that is what's encouraged, and that is also, if you play the games, especially the games on PS1 and PS2, that is the more efficient way because the combat is intentionally kind of clunky. But, you know, you are in your full right to just shoot a dude with a silenced pistol. And in Metal Gear Solid 3, if you play that way, because there are a lot of different ways to kill enemies, if you play that way, there are consequences. There is a very notable boss fight at I want to say at the end of the second act, but like, it's been a while, where you are Snake falls unconscious. And Snake is the name of the main character. I don't know if I ever established that.
Snake falls unconscious.
He falls unconscious, and he's kind of transported to this weird dreamscape where you fight a boss fight who's this specter from the afterlife called the Sorrow. And he doesn't fight you. All you have to do is get to the end of this long tunnel. I can't remember exactly, like, if there is a fail state in this segment, but what's important is that you need to get to the end. But there are obstacles that impede your movement, and these obstacles are the souls of every single enemy you've killed in the game.
Which is so cool.
And the game remembers how you killed them. So if you snap their neck, they will complain about how their neck hurts, and, like, their heads they will walk in unnatural manner so as to emphasize that. Or, you know, maybe one of them drowned. Like, there will be a detail to reflect that. And so, it's not really a failure of you as a player in that, like, yes, you have successfully gotten past these guards. It is a failure of you as not a pacifist, but a spy.
Yeah,
you are leaving a trail. And
you are supposed to be sneaky and stealthy and, you know, leave no trace, and you have left a trace.
Yeah. And more than that, there's a huge emphasis in the Metal Gear... Again, there is a huge emphasis in the Metal Gear Solid games about... I don't want to say war is bad, because that's a very reductionist way to phrase it, but, like, more so that, like, war is not supposed to be fun. Or rather, like, killing, specifically, is not supposed to be fun. You're supposed to creatively find ways around killing people in Metal Gear Solid. That is what the game rewards. That is what the game praises the player for. To have, like, Metal Gear Solid 3 is the first game where actually killing the guards has a hard consequence.
Yeah, and it's really cool. I love that set piece so much. I just wanted to tag on there that, like, I'm weird and I care too much and I roleplay even in non-role-playing games. But I get the same feeling whenever I'm playing something like the Thief series or Dishonored. Dishonored we've talked about before on the podcast. It's a sort of stealth action game where you sneak around or charge in guns blazing and try to, figure your way through these levels. It is sort of a spiritual successor, and a lot of the same people worked on it that worked on a early series of PC games called Thief. There was Thief the Dark Project, Thief 2, The Metal Age. I don't remember what Thief 3 was called because Thief 3 isn't very good. And then they put out a reboot.
Thief 3, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, and then they put out a reboot that was initially titled Thieforf that is also not very good. But Thief 1 and 2 are two of my favorite games of all time. And it's right there in the title. You are a thief. All of the mechanics of the game are built around moving quietly, being able to tell how quiet you are and how visible you are, and using that and a bunch of tools at your disposal to get through the levels.
Going to see the Bears tomorrow.
Yep. Oh my! It also features some of the best bad early game voiceover. Going to the bear pitch tomorrow. It's gonna be a real eye gouging. It's so bad. I love it so much. But I fall into this thing whenever I'm playing a game like that where it's like, I cannot be seen. I must be the night. And like, depending on how I'm feeling, sometimes I'll get to the point where it's like, if I'm seen, I'm like, well, fuck, starting this level over. But you don't have to. There's like, and Dishonored does this very well, where at the end of every level in Dishonored, you get a rating of like how sneaky you were versus how violent you were. You can get bonuses for being like never seen or for never killing anyone, or you can get bonuses on the other end of the spectrum for like killing absolutely everybody. But they sort of build into the play experience like little mini goals for you that can add to like not necessarily big overarching dramatic tension like we've been talking about so far, but at least like moment to moment additions of like, oh crud, am I out of sight enough? Is he gonna see me? Am I gonna have to get my sword out? Oh, I really don't want to get my sword out. Oh, I just cleaned my sword. I don't want blood on my sword. Oh no. And I just really enjoy that, and I like games that build in. I guess one way to add this to more games would be to add multiple engagement styles, kind of like with Metal Gear Solid and with the Dishonored series of like, you can play it multiple ways. One is easier, but the easier way might have story ramifications or difficulty ramifications later or things like that. I think that might be an interesting thing to see in more games as I take like to the skies and make this the requirement of game studios.
You mean like an adaptive difficulty system?
Not even necessarily adaptive difficulty, but like
okay.
There are kind of building on like in Metal Gear Solid 3, there are points where it's like it would be easier to just stand up and gun these people down. Mm-hmm. But then that leads to more difficulty in this later moment.
Right.
That kind of thing. Like consequences of your actions coming back to haunt you in ways that are more mechanical and maybe more difficulty oriented or something like that, rather than being
right. Okay.
And now the Rakshi Queen is here to fight you again, Commander Shepard.
The Rakshi Queen, like
it's not
Bionicle?
That's what came out of my mouth. It's not. It's something like that, but it's not Rakshi.
I thought they were called the Reapers.
Oh no, there's the Reapers. The Reapers are the big bads. There is an alien race in that you.
Got it.
I don't know if you have to, but I think you do deal with in an early story mission in Mass Effect 1 that's like something like... It sounds like Rakshi, and now that's all I can think of because it's what came out of my mouth.
Okay.
And you have the option to either kill or release the queen.
Okay.
And if you release her, then there is the potential for her to come back in like Mass Effect 3 or something like that to help you out. Anyway.
So, this is going to be a weird one, so stick with me, folks. So, I am one of 3 people. Yeah, I am one of 3 people out there that have played.
I am Dylan 1. Dylan 2 and 3 are on break right now. We are Craig.
Dylan 1 is the morning shift Dylan. That's why he can't talk for shit. But yeah, no. So, I am one of 3 people. I know only one other person who's even played this game. So stick with me, audience. But I love Valkyrie Profile. Mm-hmm. It is one of my favorite RPGs on the PS1. And so now I will explain what Valkyrie Profile is, because I've only really mentioned it in passing to you, Chris.
Fuck me up.
So this will be a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so Valkyrie Profile, in like a very quick summary, is loosely based on Norse mythology, but still it's still more in touch with Norse mythology than like many other JRPGs that borrow Norse mythology are. And so like the basic premise is that you play a Valkyrie, and you are gathering Einherjar, the souls of dead warriors, to fight for Odin in Valhalla in preparation for Ragnarok. So what this means in the game is that there are a set number of periods, and Odin's like, we need a warrior who's an archer with like these skills. And so the game is like, you get a vision, predict the fate of a warrior who's about to die. You see a cutscene that shows that warrior's backstory. The warrior joins your party, and then you go on to the next one, ad infinitum. And then also, like, you will be pointed in the direction of a dungeon where you can help train and level up these warriors. And then you customize them, and then you send them to Odin, and he will give you an evaluation based on, like, how close you were to his specifications.
It's build a Beefcake Workshop.
Oh, for real, though.
I wanted more abs on this boy.
Yes.
How
this
dare
boy
you
is
say...
too scrawny.
How dare you send me a suboptimally abdominal boy? To Niflheim with you.
You've been not giving me nothing but maggoty scrubs for 3 stinking days.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Okay, so...
And now we're gonna move forward with our lives.
Anywho. You do this, and your main character, her name is Lenneth. She really kind of approaches this job with like the same indifference that you and I would approach a minimum wage paying job.
Woo!
She's just like, all right.
So none.
Yep, time to do my 9 to 5. Also, like, I don't really care about humans. I think one of my favorite bits of flavor text in the game is there is a loot drop item called the Book of Eternal Life or whatever, and the item description for it is a book written by a foolish human who knows nothing. It is of no value.
I love that.
And that really just characterizes like the type of the type of character you're playing as. Essentially, if you basically play by Odin's rules for the entire game, you get a very bog standard NES ending where it's like, good job, Lenneth, you have defeated the evil and Valhalla won. And then the credits roll, and it's very unsatisfying and very not good. But, and I'm not sure how people found this out because it is very cryptic. It is incredibly cryptic. But you are actually supposed to do things that go against what Odin tells you to do. You have to lower, there's this in-game value called the seal rating, and you have to do things like, when you approach Odin, you can't be wearing a certain piece of equipment that you're supposed to wear in his presence. When you find sacred treasures that are supposed to be given to him as tribute, you're supposed to keep some of them. There's a castle that there's a dungeon that you are never supposed to visit because Odin never pointed out to you that if you go there, like, it unlocks something, and you just keep doing these things, and eventually you get the real ending, which is a lot better and a lot more unique. It like, the story stands out a lot more once you go off the beaten path. But I'm not sure how you're ever supposed to find this out, because I don't think NPCs really tell you, and Odin certainly doesn't tell you. And, like, yes, you can explore, but you need to do a certain number of these requirements before you can unlock the hidden ending. It's a really weird game.
I dig that. I really dig that.
Yeah. But, so anyway, the failure in this game is, you're doing what the game actually wants you to do. But what the game actually wants you to do is to openly defy what it tells you to do. It's a really weird game. But, like, it's also one of the coolest games I've ever played.
I really dig that. I'm just still stuck on, like, Odin receiving a man in the mail and just, like, eyeing him up and down and figuring out how ideal this Einherjar will be.
So strong.
So strong.
So strong.
That's what my customers are preparing me for.
Welcome to Valhalla.
Oh no.
Oh, another great thing about Valkyrie Profile is that the voice actors are all the same people who worked on such 4Kids shows as Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh no.
The Lenneth is voiced by Nurse Joy. I want to say Freya is voiced by Ash Ketchum.
Strong.
There are numerous characters voiced by Meowth.
I love this.
Highly recommended. There's no real decent way to play it legally, unfortunately. Like, there's a PSP version, but, like, there's also an iOS version, but, like, don't play that game with touch controls. But, like, check it out if you're curious.
I will. This sounds rad.
Okay, but anyway, let's, we got one more to wrap this up.
Yeah, the last thing we want to talk about is something that I'm very excited about. Dylan brought it up, and I was like, yo! I guess in case anyone out there has been living under a rock since about 1994, Pokemon is a series of video games and also a card game and also a TV series and series of films based around this world in which there are little fluffy animals with magic powers running around. And you, in the games, you take on the role of a Pokemon trainer. You go out, you catch these majestic beasts, you become their friends, and you pit them in battles against other trainers' Pokemon.
But they love it. It's like sports events.
Yeah, it's like friendly dogfighting. And they fight, and you attempt to become the very best like no one ever was, essentially. The typical sort of play structure for the Pokemon games is you go out and you try to catch as many Pokemon as you can. One of the sort of, not really victory conditions, but one of the goals in the game is to collect one of every Pokemon.
Yeah.
So that you have a complete collection. And also because Pokemon are divided into types, some of which are stronger or weaker versus other types. So you want to have like a well-balanced roster for taking out the challenges in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But some beautiful person came up with something referred to in the Pokemon community as a Nuzlocke run.
Yep.
And what a Nuzlocke run is someone was like, hey, Pokemon's fun, but I don't feel like I care enough about the individual Pokemon. Let's change that. And so they came up with a bunch of rules for how the game has to be played, and it's fucking cool.
So the rules of a Nuzlocke Pokemon challenge are, this isn't all of them, but like these are the essential ones. You have to catch the first Pokemon you see. You have to give that Pokemon a name. Once you catch a Pokemon, you can't catch any other Pokemon in that area. That's also important.
Yeah, the game world is broken up into like distinct areas.
Yeah. And once that Pokemon once that Pokemon is knocked out in battle, they are considered dead and you can never use them again.
Yep.
So that drastically increases the stakes.
So it limits the Pokemon you can have. Because of that, you become far more invested in those specific Pokemon. You come to care about them far more.
And you're not catching them based on like, oh, I like this Pokemon, or oh, I think this Pokemon will be really strong. No, you get that Pokemon,
what you get.
And you have to put the care and conditioning in to like make sure that this Pokemon makes it.
It's so cool.
And so, you know, again, if that Pokemon is knocked out, that is failure on your part. In a normal Pokemon run, that failure is mitigated by, oh, I'll just go back to a Pokemon Center where they can treat these Pokemon and heal them. But that is not what the narrative of a Nuzlocke is about. The narrative of a Nuzlocke is, it is specifically you and your ragtag team of Pokemon beating the odds.
Yep. And it's so, like, I love this because it speaks to that desire for, like, failure and hardship in your stories.
Yeah.
Not to say that this is the correct way to play a Pokemon game by any means. Like,
definitely
the games
not.
are perfectly fine and they are very fun and, like, play however you want to play. But I love that this is a group, this is a creation that has been adopted because people, maybe it's just that they're challenge seekers and they wanted it to be harder, but it also has the side effect of, like, creating a more dramatic and a more narratively tense and narratively rewarding emergent narrative. And that's really fucking cool. I've never done a Nuzlocke run. I should do a Nuzlocke run.
I haven't either. I haven't done the Nuzlocke, but I do name my Pokemon. They're all musical references, and that alone has made it more fun. But
that feels like a JoJo fan thing to do.
It is a very JoJo fan thing to do, but I actually didn't get it from JoJo's. There was a Let's Play I watched where it was 3 friends doing a Nuzlocke challenge, and they decided to make all of their Pokemon hip-hop references.
I love it.
And so, like, I did it based on that. But they are also JoJo's fans, so who knows?
Yeah. I think that can probably do it for us.
Actually, before we wrap up, the only thing I wanted to add was that the Nuzlocke... I saved the Nuzlocke for last because, specifically, the Nuzlocks are really cool in that, like, we keep talking about this emergent narrative and player narrative, and Nuzlocks are cool because there are dozens of artists who have made comics based on their Nuzlocke runs.
Yep.
So that these Pokemon that they have grown to love and care for have become characters that are then sent to other people to appreciate and enjoy.
Yep. You create a story out of the hardships that you face because of this optional rule set that you put on yourself, and that's like...
That is the coolest thing about video games. That is why I love video games.
Yeah, to tie us back into our thesis very neatly, I think the existence of Nuzlocke runs and the fact that like they are such a widely regarded thing in the Pokemon fandom just sort of speaks to people want these story moments.
Yeah.
People want to have a connection with a game beyond just the cut and dry story that is presented textually. They want to feel like they are having an impact on some kind of narrative that emerges from play.
It adds to the character of the world and also the character of your adventure.
Yeah.
I also know people who, like, deliberately play Pokemon. Every time they play a single entry, they will try a different team just to see, like, you know, just to keep the experience fresh and to kind of roleplay a different trainer from the previous one.
Yeah.
That I just find that really cool.
Yeah. I'm hoping that as time goes on and more energy in the space of making games can be devoted to story over, like, you know, we've reached the point where graphics aren't going to get that much better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that, like, the graphics race will peter out and, like, some energy there will be able to be funneled towards, you know, more of the creative side.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more games that find a way to engage with failure and engage with that you get knocked down, you gotta get back up kind of drive in stories and in the way that people are. And, you know, who knows? Maybe we'll see that. In the meantime, I feel like I'm going to start up a Nuzlocke run. And to expedite that, let's go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Backstage Gaming. I had fun this week. This was a fun episode.
I quite enjoyed this.
We are on the internet, as you doubtless have surmised so far, but specifically
Chris.
Our internet home is bsgpod.com. You can head there to find our full archive of podcasts. You can download us straight from there. You can read up a little bit on Dylan and me. We've got some bios. We've got texts. We've got things about, you know, our sort of glossary of terms that we're developing. I still want... What?
I'm just imagining someone handing out burned CDs of our podcast on the street.
This is our fire mixtape. Coming to you in... I'm just going to start dropping flash drives with single episodes into bags at my Whole Foods. I love it. But yeah, check us out at our website, bsgpod.com, and just see what we're up to there. You can also find our podcast, of course, on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We are on Google Play in their store. So just, you know, check us out. Share the word. Help us grow. We love you.
If you do like us, you can hit us up on social media. We don't bite, we promise. We got Facebook. We're on Twitter. Our handle is at BSG_cast. We have a YouTube. And, you know, if you wanna post about us, please be sure to use the hashtag BSGPod.
Help my podcast grow!
How many times have we made that Rita Repulsa joke?
I don't think we have yet, somehow.
I feel like we have. We definitely have.
Well, enjoy this repeat. This Rita Repulsa repeat.
Anyway, So also, if you like the artwork that we use for our episodes as the thumbnail, that is done by our friend Brendan French. You should check out his Squarespace. It's at brendanfrench.squarespace.com. That is BRENNEN-French.squarespace.com.
You should also go and check out our friend BioQuery. He is the musician behind our theme song, Dot Sound Radio Volume 1 Instrumentality. He's super cool. He's been posting a lot on Instagram recently about a new either album or EP that's in the process of being mastered to be released, and I'm very excited to hear it. I think he's also been doing some production stuff with some other music artists out in LA, and he's just a super cool guy. You should go check him out either on Spotify or at his SoundCloud, which is soundcloud.com/bioquery. That is soundcloud.com/BIOQUERY. You were going to say something in the middle of that plug, Dylan.
I was going to say, he did release an album recently, last month or last year.
Pop Songs for Late Capitalism is actually a slightly older. It's like a year or two old now. There's there's a new thing that's in the process of being mastered that I'm super hyped for.
Okay, awesome.
You should also be on the listen for Dylan on the upcoming arc of Unexplored Places, an actual play podcast produced by our friend Christine. They actually just wrapped the last episode last night, so
yeah,
the last episode of that arc, I should say, and I'm super excited to hear it. And be on the listen for me having truly terrible things happen to me in audio form on the season finale of the upcoming podcast Unwell, a
Spoilers.
Midwestern Gothic. I mean,
I
show up in the last episode to be
you're an NPC.
Badded. Yeah, I'm an
NPC in of course stakes are going to be raised.
Yeah, but it's set to be a really cool podcast.
I don't know what it's about.
I know very little about what it's about. What I know has me very excited, and you should all check that out. It's got a brief pre-Ep 1 thing up on Apple Podcast already. I think that about does it for us. Also, it's been a while since we plugged this. Go check out Magical History of Knox County, the first podcast that Dylan and I worked on together.
Oh God, please do. It's quite good.
It's at magicalhistorypodcast.com. It's also on iTunes. It's
unlike
really
this podcast, it has a script.
Yeah,
and I talk good.
Yeah, we forced Dylan into a small room and didn't let him out until he did vocal warm-ups.
That's not true. I did not do vocal warm-ups for Magical History.
But anyway, go check that out if you like our voices, Dylan's in particular. And yeah, I think that we will let ourselves off the hook with that. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode of Backstage Gaming, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye.
We love you.